All right, it is now 2:02, so we're going to get started. Welcome to our second life skills education session, and today's topic is budgeting, which as a whole, we typically seem to underestimate how important that is in our day-to-day life. So we will go ahead and get starting budgeting, investing for your future. First off, if you weren't here with us before, again, I see several names, but I also see some new names and faces. So welcome, welcome. My name is Kayla Richard, and I work for the Impact West Virginia program here at the Center for Excellence in Disabilities at WVU. And my position is as education and employment specialist. So I help different departments throughout the CED a little bit, but mainly with our group of individuals who are new mothers who have had infants with neonatal abstinence syndrome. So what we're going to talk about, obviously budgeting, but what about budgeting? We're going to be pretty general as we go through, but as always, and I'll mention again here toward the end, if there are specific questions or you would like more resources or you would like me to work on getting you more resources, please let me know, because we definitely can go way more in depth with all of this. This is just kind of a general outline, but we're going to talk about what is a budget, how do we create a budget, and how are we going to use it and stick to it? And then also, what are some pros and cons of budgeting and what kind of things to look for? So first question, and you can put it in the chat or you can say out loud, either way. But let's say that you bought a lottery ticket last night, and on the way home, you just found out that it's the winning ticket. All numbers match. You have got it good. Okay. What is the first thing that you would do after you get your money? First thing you would do with, everyone thinks this, right? We've all asked ourselves this question. Okay, so we're going to pay off some debts, house and medical, go to Disney and discuss your options. That's my husband and I. We're always like, okay, we're telling no one, we're getting out of town for a couple days. Okay, student loans, bills, house. So as a whole, I'm seeing we're a pretty responsible group of individuals in here today. What is interesting is we're here today to talk about budgeting. And out of all the answers is this question, think of it as like a Family Feud response. As this question gets answered, oh, Tamika got it, save. We hardly ever hear the answer invest or save, at least not first, right? That's kind of a second thing that we think about because we know there's other things that we have to do with this money or we want to do with this money. But as a whole, this group seems pretty responsible and is the things we need to do. So number one is always some sort of big purchase. And that might be your house. That might be a vacation house. Wouldn't that be nice? A car, a travel destination. Surprisingly to me, donating is in the top 5, paying off our debts and not a purchase, but I'm quitting my job. I'm done. I don't need it anymore. I'm going to quit. Number 6 is invest and save. Budgeting is not just for people who do not have enough money. And again, I said that typically we underestimate budgeting because if you are not at a point where you need to budget to make it from paycheck to paycheck, a lot of times we don't pay a lot of attention to it. But it's very important because it is for everyone who wants to ensure that their money is enough, especially in the future. So when we think about budgeting, how many of you have some sort of budget in mind at all times? So you know what you can afford and what you can't afford. If you don't raise your hand or say me, we need to be friends because I need more friends in that situation. Anytime we have a budget, while we think, okay, if I go to my big one, home improvements, if I go to Lowe's or to Home Depot, I know what I can afford, I know what I can't afford. And if we're doing some kind of home improvement project, then I know what I can spend, I know what I can't. But anytime we plan out what we're going to spend money on, or we look at what we have, we're technically budgeting, but we want to learn how to do that more efficiently. And hopefully everyone received the email that had your income and expenses list. And if you have already filled that out, great. If not, we're going to work on goals a little bit with that. So kind of keep your income and expenses in mind as we go through this. But when we focus on budgeting, two areas: what we bring in, what we put out. So our income, any money received, especially on a regular basis. And then it could be through work, but it doesn't have to be. We'll kind of talk about what those different things are. So it could be investments, it could be wages and salary, or it could be this group of things called passive income, which is becoming a more common thing in today's world. And we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. We also have expenses, and we have two main categories. We have a fixed expense and a variable expense. These are costs required for something. So anything we're spending money on. And again, we're going to talk about both of those categories here in just a second. So first we have income. And when we talk about income, one very smart way to look at this is, what is my guaranteed income? And unfortunately, there's never any true guaranteed income, because something could happen tomorrow that we're not going to get paid, right? But we definitely have some that we can trust we will have tomorrow or the next day or each month that is coming in, things like our paycheck from work. But if we're not able to work, then we may have something like a disability amount or retirement or pension or something we get through Social Security. We also have other income. Again, we trust for the most part that it's guaranteed, it's going to be there, but that doesn't always mean it's going to be there, especially these items down toward the bottom that have these asterisks beside them. This is normally guaranteed income. However, the longer you've been receiving these things, and some of you may receive these, you know that the longer you've received them, something has probably came up where it's been delayed or it's been declined, and you've had to go through a rough process of getting it reinstated, but we know that it may not be there when we need it. An example of these, one of the clients that I'm currently working with, especially the SNAP benefits, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, her child recently was taken out of the home, and she was very, very dependent on that income coming in for groceries and things. Well, now that the child is no longer in the home, those SNAP benefits have been cut pretty dramatically. And of course, we know there's not a child to support, but the child was an infant, and the amount of money really wasn't going a lot to that baby because of WIC and other things being used. But losing that money really, really hurt them. So while there was still money coming in, it wasn't the same amount, and we end up having that happen a lot. Then we also have this, I told you we talk about it again, passive income. Does anyone know what passive income is? When we talk about passive income, these are things that we are doing that we don't necessarily have to actively participate in to make an income. And there's a lot of crowdsourcing and things. Cryptocurrency, that would be an example. If you have a lot of people that are living paycheck to paycheck may not be able to do this, but if you rent out some sort of rental property or equipment, an example, as a former teacher, I still have a Teachers Pay Teachers account where I had created some worksheets and I post them, and people pay me like 50 cents every time that they download those worksheets. Another example, living in Morgantown, there's a lot of college students that, depending on where they live, they will rent out their parking spaces for parking on football games or basketball games. Those will be things. Oh, Airbnb, that's a great one, Tamika, thank you. That would be another example. That's a pretty popular one, actually. But those are things that you're not maybe regularly receiving income for. You're not having to really do much to upkeep it and get it in, but it's more passive. It's kind of money we're getting in the background. So when we plan our income, and this is the income section from that kind of worksheet that was emailed out. When we are putting in our income, we want to put in all of our income, but if we're planning ahead, then we are going to put our guaranteed income in first. The things that we know we are going to have that is regular payments month after month that we can count on being there, we hope. Then we're going to add in additional income, more than likely, as we get it. If it is a paycheck to paycheck situation, then we're going to put it in there. But as we start really diving into where we need to cut things down, then we want to focus on those guaranteed incomes first. And we never want to rely on possible income if we can keep from it. Sometimes we kind of have to, but we never want to, if at all possible. So when it comes to expenses, we have two main categories. We have fixed and we have variables. Fixed are expenses like your monthly bills that have to be paid each month, and for the most part are going to be the same amount or very close to the same amount. Now, some fixed expenses like utility bills may be a variable amount because if it's summertime and we're using more AC than normal, then we know that our electric bill is going to be a little bit higher. If it's wintertime and we have gas heating, then we know that our gas bill is probably going to be a little higher than what it would have been other months out of the year. Our variable expenses, these are the things that are going to change month to month. So they're very variable on what we're charging. There's also other things that kind of fit into both categories. We see this happen a lot. And a lot of times we refer to those as either flexible expenses or intermittent expenses. Kind of like our utility bills, a good example. If you have ever paid, say, your car insurance, some people will get it where they pay it quarterly or they get it biannually, some even annually if they can afford to do that lump payment all at once. Those would be examples. We know how much it's going to cost. We can figure in that amount of money, but we're not actually paying it every month. And because of that, it doesn't technically fit into expense. But as we're preparing our budget, the best thing and responsible thing to do in that case would be to go ahead and figure out what that monthly payment is and to put it into our budget as a monthly expense. Because then if we have that money, we're putting it in, we can put that amount into savings so that at our 6 month, 3 month, 12 month, whatever we're paying, that money's in there and it's kind of earmarked so that we have it. And we're not really hit with that out of the blue because we're already expecting it. Some other examples of our fixed expenses: rent or a mortgage payment, loan payments. How many still have student loan payments? Probably several. I feel like I'm going to die before I get those paid off, right? Your taxes, membership fees, your utilities. Again, they may fluctuate a little bit. Your phone and cable bill, your child care, how much you're paying for that. Variable expenses, we know that they're there, but they're not always going to be the same price or every month. Medical expenses, car repairs, entertainment, groceries, calculated bills. So again, that we're using extra electric in the summer, we're using extra gas in the winter. Those fit into those both categories. Gasoline, how much we're spending. When do you travel more? We also know that gasoline is not always the same price, right? And emergency costs, which we'll talk a good bit about here in a few minutes. So when we fill in our expenses side, we want to calculate our fixed expenses first. Not always are those, we'll look at needs versus wants, not always are those fixed expenses more of a need than others. But traditionally, they do tend to be the things that we're going to be hurting the most if we don't get those accounted for first. Our electric, our home, our loans that are keeping us from going into bigger debt. Those are all things we want to calculate first. We know they're going to come out. Then we're able to put in our variable costs. And this is where the budgeting part comes in. So these are the things that oftentimes we can cut. We can cut back on, we can cut the amount. Say entertainment. Just about every person is going to have some sort of entertainment cost, or that may be eating out or extras on groceries, whatever that might be. But we're able to kind of manipulate that a little bit to fit our needs. Then we want to look at being strategic when we make cuts in those expenses. The other thing we know that we can do is we can look at patterns that we start seeing in these expenses, especially when it comes to our variable expenses and things like entertainment. And this is what that worksheet looked like that was emailed out. So now we have to put it all together. What are we looking at as far as our income amount? And what are we looking for as far as our expenses are concerned? And hopefully we end up with more on the income side than we do on the expenses side. But we all know we've all had at least a month somewhere where that wasn't the case. So sometimes it becomes a balancing act, and we get in income, our expenses come down, our expenses go up, and our income goes down. And a lot of times it's because of those emergency bills that pop up out of nowhere that we can expect. We know something's going to happen, but we have no idea what it's going to be or how much it's going to cost us. So when we end up with what we want, with more income than expenses, we're in the black. We're doing good. We have extra money, which is where every single person wants to be. What do we do with that money when we have it? And a good example of this is, think about if knock on wood, hopefully everyone does, but if you get a tax return at the beginning of the year when you have filed your taxes, what are you going to do? Yes, Heather, I will definitely be sure to send you both of these. Hopefully they're in here so it all makes sense as we're going through, but yes, I absolutely will send those to you. Think about what you do with your taxes, and you probably know someone who is a little more or a little less responsible when they get their tax return, right? And we all hope that we get a tax return. If you're like me, I think I've only gotten one in my entire life. Every other time I've owed something. But if we get that money, what are you going to do with it? Because we're ahead. Thank you, Sue. Sue just put the budget tracker in there for you, Heather. What is smart for us to do is that extra money, especially if we have not planned ahead to know what we're going to spend it on, put it into savings. Then as time goes on and we can plan around it, if there is something for it to be used for, we can use it. And this savings even goes for, we said if we won the lottery, we're paying off our bills, we're paying off our debts. This also, we can be more strategic for how we go about paying off debts so that we're able to use that money to the absolute best way that we can. One thing that we tend to see happen is we celebrate, right? We got a bonus from work. We got an extra $100, $1,000. We got our tax return. We're going to go out to eat. We're going to celebrate. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. But we also want to make sure that we're not doing that with the entire bonus or the entire tax return. On the opposite end of the spectrum, the one we don't like to talk about because we don't like when it happens, sometimes we end up with a smaller amount of income and larger expenses, in which case we end up in the red, at least for that time period. So we know that we are going to have to cut somewhere to make things work. We also have to watch, and if you were in our last session, I used the term snowballing. This is a different use of the term snowballing because now we're looking at financial only, nothing to do with self-care directly here. But we also have to watch for snowballing taking place and work to make the balance, because if we're not strategic with it, what happens is the next month we accrue debt this month, and next month we're in the red again. And that just keeps happening and keeps happening, and those debts keep getting bigger and bigger. So by having a budget, hopefully we're able to stay on top of that a little bit more. So when we do our goals, and we're going to talk about these at the very end, but if you didn't get a chance to fill out your budget sheet, or if you fill out your budget sheet but you haven't really thought about your goals, we're going to talk more about things that will affect this for the remainder of the presentation here. But I want you to think about your total income minus your total expenses. What was that amount? Were you in the black or not? If you were in the black, what are you going to be doing with your savings? We're looking at setting a goal. So what are we going to do? What are we planning on doing? Are we going to do anything? Maybe not. Maybe we don't need to use that money right now. We don't have an extreme goal. So maybe we're just working on getting enough into our savings. or building up our emergency fund? How can you take advantage of putting money into savings? And do you need to work on paying off a debt? Maybe that's not at the forefront of your mind, but it's there. Is now the time to start paying on that? Or do I keep doing my monthly payments and put that money back into an emergency fund? Because we all know that things happen. Or are we in the red? If we're in the red, how can we work on changing that? What steps can we take? What things can we cut? Do you need to work on paying off debts while in the red? Or if we don't have many debts, but we're in the red, what might happen, or what steps do we need to take to keep from going into debt by being in red this month or next month or this quarter? And the biggest thing is, what's causing it? Can it be fixed? Is it something that I could have prepared for? Is it something that I can fix now? How many of you have ever heard of Murphy's Law? And if you haven't heard it just called Murphy's Law, let's look at this. Anything that can go wrong is going to happen. It will happen. Some of you probably have that sort of mentality. I see thumbs going up. We've all thought that, right? Now, some may not know where that comes from. So Murphy's Law is how it first started. It's not like our laws of motion, but it's usually attributed to a captain in the Air Force back in the 1940s. And the story goes that Murphy complained about one of his technicians that was serving underneath of him on a project. And he said that if there was anything that could go wrong, he'll find it. He'll find a way to do it wrong. Yes, never-ending story. It's a never-ending cycle, right? He referred to this because the individual was working on figuring out, calculating something with a rocket sled at the time. So oftentimes we'll say, we can do it. It's not rocket science. Unfortunately for this fella, it actually was rocket science. And his person in command over him just liked to pick on him that he would figure out a way to do it wrong. What doesn't always get put with this, we say it all the time, if it's gonna go wrong, it's gonna go wrong. If I didn't have bad luck, I wouldn't have any. There's several, but there's two other parts to this that I want to make sure that we see. First law of Murphy's Law is anything that can go wrong will. Number two, however, is nothing is ever as easy as it looks. Number three is everything takes longer than you think it will. And I think there's 15 or 16 laws to this. So those are the top three. But when we think about that, anything that can go wrong will. And a lot of times we've all experienced this, but it's important to remember that in order for us to stay on top of things, it's not going to be easy and it's not going to be quick, even though we would like it to be. That's never the case. All right, so now we're going to look at needs versus wants. And I'm hoping we're all old enough in here that at some point in time you have learned the difference between a need and want. And if not, we've got little descriptions here. So a need is something necessary in order to live and function, and a want is something that can improve your quality of life, but it's not necessary for your survival. So we're going to look at two examples, one with groceries, one with clothing. When it comes to groceries, we know that we have to eat to survive. If you don't eat, you're going to starve. You're not going to live very long. However, while we know that we have to have food in order to survive, what kind of food do we actually need and at what price? I will forever stand on my soapbox that I need Heinz ketchup. That's the only name brand that I need. But otherwise, if it got too low in my bank account, even Heinz ketchup I could do without. So what are we actually buying? Why are we buying it? And is it necessary? Jif peanut butter, me too, Cheryl. That is my go-to peanut butter. But you know what? If there was some other need, I think I could get by with like some Peter Pan, maybe. I don't know that there's much difference in cost, but you know, trying times. When we look at clothing, we also know that clothes are needed. We have to be clothed. We have to have protection against elements for our body. However, we don't always need what we're buying as far as clothes. We know that we have to be protected. And we also know that there's a rule that says no shirt, no shoes, no service. This is because sometimes a need is also something that allows us to meet a need. An example of this, a vehicle. If we went by classifications of need versus wants, a vehicle would not be a need. There's nothing about that that is keeping us alive. However, if we need a way of transportation to get us to work, because money in and of itself is buying everything we need to keep us alive, then in that case, transportation or a vehicle would be a need. However, we don't have to have the biggest, latest, coolest pickup truck on the market. We need transportation to get us from A to Z. And that's similar to clothing. So we don't have to have something just because it's the newest fad. A lot of times that's nice. That's a want that helps us feel included in the community. It gives us a talking point when we're working with others or talking with others, but it's not a want. So when we're looking at budgeting, our needs are the things we're focusing on first. And sometimes, unfortunately, we go back to that balancing act when it comes to needs versus wants. Sometimes it's going to get into a gray area because for some things that are wants, they're going to play big roles in our life. How many of you have children? This is just an example. But if you have children, then we might be able to afford our Jif peanut butter or our Heinz ketchup, or granted, those are, splitting pennies sometimes, but we're able to afford those things. But we also know if we have kids, their needs are also very expensive. An example of this, if you have a family, how much does it cost to take your family to a movie? Even if you're not buying snacks and soda, it's still very, very expensive. So we may have to give up some of our wants and some of our creature comforts so that we can afford to meet the needs of someone else. By the way, if this is a choice that you struggle with when it comes to having kids, especially because you find it hard, either one, not to spend on your kids, or two, you feel like you're not a good enough parent if you're not doing things like taking them to the movies, I encourage you to attend our session in October because we're going to talk about parenting tips and tricks. And this will be one topic that we discuss pretty in depth at that one. So when we look at ways to save, I want you guys to think of some that may not be on this list, or things that you already do, or things that you may start doing. We'll kind of chat about that here in a second. But things to do so that we can save. Cutting out extra spending and establishing our spending patterns. So when do we spend money and what are we buying? Do we spend money on our way home from work? Yes, Cheryl, I feel like most parents do. Are you buying breakfast in the morning because you were late? Or, this is mine, I'll tell on myself, or because the night before you had time to put stuff together for the next day, but you didn't. So, oh, well, I don't have anything this morning. I'm going to buy something on the way to work. Coffee is the number one extra spending item for Americans. What we could do, if coffee is the thing that we spend the most money on, and we can look at our spending patterns, make it at home. Do we have a Keurig? Can we make it for ourselves? And the one thing that everyone always says, well, Starbucks tastes better than the coffee I make at my house. Probably. But there are things, and actually I was looking at this before this session, there's actually websites that for free will teach you how to make even like the cool little leaf designs on your coffee and how to do that at home for pretty efficiently and budget friendly ways, so that you don't have to spend a lot of money on a class or a lot of money for a really nice coffee machine. Counter Culture was one of the websites I was looking at, by the way, if you would like that. Don't shop when you're hungry or when you're stressed out, because if you're hungry, everything's going to look good and you're more likely to put that into your shopping cart. Plan ahead. This could be when you go to the store. Yes, Tamika, I'm the same way. I'm not even going to lie. Sometimes I will take coffee to work and I will still stop and get a coffee at Dunkin' because there's a Dunkin' right on my way to work. And I know that. I know that pattern. When we plan ahead, do we have a shopping list when we go to the store? Is it on our phone or is it on a written list? Believe it or not, you're more likely to stick to your written list than you are to the list on your notepad on your phone, because you can physically cross things off. If you are a person that's bad at doing that, that might be something that will help. Also, when you're planning ahead, think about things like trips, or when you go on vacation, or when you're going on a special outing. Vacation's a huge one. How many people have gone on vacation and you're like, we'll eat one meal a day out. Every other meal we'll make it at the hotel or wherever we're staying. We'll pack, we'll have a picnic when we go out. And then you never do that. You end up eating 2 or 3 meals out. So making sure we plan ahead and not just say that's what we're going to do, but we actually plan where are we getting the groceries from. That helps. Give and take. Cut out our name brands, substitute for cheaper options. Maybe we need to do less things. Yes, the Kroger click list, it's very nice. It's not Target. There's another, it's definitely not Walmart. There's another store that has something so similar to the click list as well. Give and take. Again, are there cheaper options, or are there things that we can give up so that we can get something else? Watch for automatic withdrawal accounts. Did we sign up for a subscription? Again, telling myself, if I am paying for something and they're like, do you want to join? You'll get a 10% discount. I have done that definitely more than once, probably more than twice, where I'm like, yeah, I want a 10% discount. And then as soon as I see it come up as my notification, I cancel it immediately. If you are a person that forgets to cancel it, making sure that you're watching what's coming out of your bank account and watching that budget will help significantly. You also can look at things, if you've signed up for something, can you renew that and get a discounted rate? One of those that I know my husband uses is for his satellite radio. Each year he lets it go out and then he renews on the special yearly rate, and he actually gets it for less than he would have had to have paid to have kept it going. Netflix, Hulu, those sort of things will have deals every once in a while that you might be able to do that. Coupons and discounts, they're everywhere. You just have to know where to find them. And we specifically for groceries, we'll also look at that in the September session when we talk about cooking within limits. Refinancing, this is an option. It may not be for everyone, but it is an option, especially with large loans. If you are, an example right now, if you are looking at buying a house, you are over 5% interest rates for our 20 to 30 year mortgages. 1 year ago, only 1 year ago, it was at 2.9. It was more than 2% less at that time. Yes, using student discounts or work discounts, you might be surprised what you qualify for. So looking at refinancing, don't strive, this comes for our comparison shopping, don't strive for instant gratification. It feels great to go out and buy something and just do it. But if you have a habit of doing that because you like that feeling, try to cut back, really comparison shop. If it's not something you need this very minute, then let's look around, let's shop around, let's talk to some other people. Maybe it's something you want, and then you talk to other people and you find out maybe it's not the best purchase at the time. Automatic savings transfers. This is huge, and sometimes it depends on the bank you're using. So this might be something to shop around with banks. But if we kind of have this pay yourself first mentality, if you have a certain amount of your paycheck automatically put into savings each month, you don't even have to go through the steps, because this can be draining for some people. You don't even have to go through the steps of doing that on your phone or going to the bank in person to make that happen. It will just automatically do it every month. We also have checking your banking plans. There are bank bonuses. Sometimes if you start an account with certain banks, they will pay you a sign-on bonus. You can look into CDs or the certificates of deposits for better saving options. What's going to happen with money you're putting in your savings? You can look at higher interest savings accounts, because we all know that those 2 pennies we earn every month for the money in our bank account is nice. We also know it's going to take a long time to add up to anything. So some banks have higher. Granted, there's going to be some cons with that. You probably have to keep more money in your savings or a certain percentage for overdraft protection, but those are options. You also, higher interest savings can happen a lot with online banking and online banks. But again, that's not always an option for everyone. It does help it to be out of sight, out of mind. So you don't have to see it every time you go to an ATM and get your receipt back. You never see that money. It's just there if you have to have it. One huge thing, if you are a person that really has to watch and you are that paycheck to paycheck, look at check reordering when you are starting a bank account or high-load check sequencing. If you don't know what that is, if you have your rent, you have your electric bill, you have your groceries, you are buying those on 3 different days, it's going to take the amount out that you spend on the day that that purchase is done. However, if all 3 of those came out on the same day, then there are banks that would take the largest amount first. So if your mortgage was on the same day as your electric bill, and we all know that a lot of times it's the 1st of the month, the 15th of the month, or the last day of the month, and a lot of these payments come out together, a lot of banks will take the largest bill first, and then the next, and then the next. And then we end up overdraft because that first amount takes down what we have in there, and we weren't ready for all of those to come out on the same day. A lot of times those are on accounts that offer significant overdraft protection, which is great. Overdraft protection is fantastic. But when that's a side or a con of having that, then we have to really pay attention. Make sure when we're planning on going to the grocery store, don't just plan on going and buying what you need at the house at that moment. Look at a weekly or a monthly menu. What are you going to fix? Can I buy it in bulk? A lot of times people will have like a Costco or a Sam's membership. There are some people that can't afford to get that Sam's or Costco. But when we look at how much am I saving if I buy these things in bulk, how much does the membership cost? That's all part of that budgeting and looking at what benefit you are getting. If you are a person that currently has debt, now, if you are a person that currently has debt like me, and you have your home payment, your car payment, your student loans, but it is not to almost a debilitating stage, we're going to keep working through that because we know that those are payments. Unfortunately, a lot of people have trouble paying those debts along with everything that we need in the day-to-day. So these are some things that could help. Number one, choosing whether to pay biggest or smallest first. And again, we said pros and cons. Some people are going to do better with paying the biggest debt first. Some will do better with paying the smallest or several smallest. One thing that tends to help across the board is working on paying the things with the highest interest rates first. So as we have a little extra, we pay a little extra on the things that we have the highest amount of interest toward first, because in the long run, that is going to save us the most money. Now, not everyone's concerned about the long run because we need to get past the short term. So in that case, consider debt consolidation. This, again, may not be for everyone, but it also may be worth checking into. So can we come out ahead if we consolidate into one lump loan, into one payment? What are our interest rates currently? If we put everything into one, will that help with the interest amount? However, if you are thinking about debt consolidation, and this will tie to a couple later on, we also definitely have to look at, is there any penalty with any of our current loans or debt situations that we will take on if we pay everything at once from a consolidation? Because unfortunately that does happen. Student loans are a good example of that. A lot of student loans, you actually will get hit with a fee if you pay them off early. However, this will be the billing office. If it's something like a hospital bill, a lot of times if you pay that off early, they will give you a discount because so often those don't get paid in full. So if they can get their money, they're going to be fairly lenient a lot of times and give you a little bit of a discount. Sometimes it's a percentage, sometimes it might just be so much off, but there definitely can be some pros to doing that as well. Look at refinancing, similar to on the last slide with like a mortgage. You might be able to finance to get a short-term benefit that again will be a long-term benefit because you're not going to have to pay as much in those interest rates. When it comes to our billing offices want money. They want their money, especially with medical bills. And those are those emergency unexpected costs. So when we come up and we are willing to talk to the billing office, they will help us make payment plans. They will help to help with our payoff plans, and making sure that we're talking to them also goes on the record that we're working on paying that debt, avoiding all of the calls, and hopefully you don't have to ever get to that place. But it happens to the best of us where we just avoid the calls because we don't want to hear about the debt that we haven't paid off. If we are working with those billing offices before something gets sent to collections, a lot of times that is only to our benefit. If we can, don't let things get to a collections agency. Make sure that you are documenting everything throughout every process of this payment or of this bill. A lot of times, as long as you are documenting and you are paying something, then you are going to be worked with and not sent to collections. Granted, there is not any set rule about when they can send you to collections or how long it has to be. What we do have is the Affordable Care Act did go in to help require nonprofit hospitals to give patients sufficient time to apply for financial assistance before they take extraordinary measures or sending to collections. The downfall here is what is sufficient time, because it is not outlined. There is nothing that actually says that you have 90 days. That's typically what you'll hear. As long as you pay within 90 days, you're good. It's not really in the books that says that. But if you are making the good attempt, a lot of times that will help you. And that's why this pay something. Don't completely avoid, because the one thing when it comes to collections, if you are showing or if you are looking like a bad investment that you are not going to pay this bill, you are more likely to get sent to collections and more likely to get sent quicker to collections. So we always want to make sure that we are working and we are documenting. Another example of this billing office payoff options. A lot of times those billing offices, especially medical bills, that's the one I'm focusing on with this one. But if you had a significant bill for an unplanned medical occurrence, a lot of times the hospitals will help keep you in touch with individuals or groups or organizations that will help pay for either medical debt as a whole, or an example, a lot of times with ambulance expenses. Ambulances cost so much money if you ever have to take one. But there are a lot of groups and organizations that actually work with hospitals to help pay that fee. The same with if you ever have to be taken by helicopter, there are groups that will help for that as well. So let's look at a scenario. Let's say we're going to dine out. In the chat box, tell me how many times a week do you think that you dine out? And that could be just you, or you're buying things for the whole family to bring back. Ooh, Heather, 0. So if we pay Heather, she's going to make us all dinner. At least once, 2. Okay, so let's say we dine out 2 times per week. So for Sue and Tamika, we've got our 2. You guys meet this perfectly. If we dine out 2 times per week, and we'll say 15 each time. Granted, you may be lower, especially if you are only purchasing by yourself, but it's hard to get less than $10 just by going to McDonald's anymore. So 15 is pretty middle of the line for 1-2 people. If 15 each time, 2 times a week, we're looking at $120 a month, which still might be manageable. We don't know, maybe you're pretty well in the black. When we look at this in a wider scale, we're looking at almost $1,500 a year from eating out. And now for most of us, we can probably afford to do that. We're doing it weekly, right? We don't really think about how that's adding up day to day. But when we look at the big picture, we can see exactly what that's costing us. And by making a budget and focusing on those patterns, we're able, yes, Sue, I'm the same. I would say we probably eat out about 3 times a week, I would say. Maybe a little bit more. It depends on if school's in or not. When school's in, I guarantee you I have a 6-year-old and we go through the drive-through probably at least twice after school, just because it's like right at dinner time with the after school program and it's quick and it's easy. Or I'll grab him something through a drive-through and then I'll go home and cook dinner, because if not, he'll be whining and complaining the whole time I'm cooking. And that's something I just need to deal with. But I know that I buy more fast food during the school year. Bad habits. If you smoke, so we're looking at smoking, we can think of all the bad habits we could have. But if you smoke a pack a week, which dining out, $15, I may have overestimated, but I don't know that I know anyone who smokes that only smokes a pack a week. That's pretty low number, but yeah, a pack a day, pack every 2 days, probably a little more like it. But in this scenario, pack a week. If we're looking at around $8 a pack, that's the current average right now. Granted, depending on which type, that might be a give or take that you've changed brands because it's cheaper. That's $32 a month or $384 a year. And again, this is probably pretty low for someone who actually drinks or smokes. But if you think of, do you drink? Do you buy alcohol? Or your coffee, how many coffees are you getting a week? And then we factor those numbers in. It ends up being a good bit. By the way, did you know that the average American dines out almost 6 times a week? So you guys are good. You're way below the average. And when I said that I didn't know anyone who only smokes a pack a week, the average person who smokes about 14 cigarettes a day, or about 3/4 of a pack every day. So again, when we find those patterns, we're able to do a little bit of math, and it may not be the math that is going to make you very happy. Just to show you that you are far from alone when it comes to financial matters, here are a few factoids. 47% of Americans can't handle a $500 emergency without having to worry about it. And we think $500, that's a lot. What kind of emergency are we going to have? A medical emergency. We just had to have a plumber come out and snake and get a clog out of our drains. It was $600, which really hurts the budget. If you have something happen to your vehicle, the work on it alone might be that much. 66% of Americans fear that they won't be able to afford healthcare this coming year. And that included with or without insurance. 1 in 10 adults, or approximately 9%, which 23 million people, owe medical debt. This includes 11 million who owe more than $2,000 and 3 million who owe more than $10,000. Yeah, it's unreal how much it costs. Nearly 1 in 4 Americans are skipping medical care because of how much it costs them. And we also know, when we look at emergency funds here in the next couple slides, we also know that not getting medical treatment is probably going to cost us more in the long run, because we don't always have preventative care. We have sick care. When it gets really, really bad, that's when we're going and getting it seen about. Yes, it's horrible. You put off procedures, you put off annual visits because you know how much it's going to cost. But is it better to get things looked at now? Can we work to save up for it so we don't get in that position? Around 64% of Americans are living, definition, paycheck to paycheck. Meaning if they did not get their next paycheck, they would be in trouble, which is where our emergency funds come in. This is not something, referring back to Murphy's Law, an emergency fund and building it up is not easy, and it does not come quickly because we have emergencies come up all the time. But we need to start somewhere. So anytime that we are in the black, put it towards savings. And there is nothing wrong with earmarking that money that's in savings for particular categories. The more ahead you get, start focusing on what am I actually saving that money for. We want to start with trying to put back $500 to $1,000. That's a huge amount. I know it sounds like a lot, but we want to start with that because that $500 tends to be where we are most worried about having an unexpected expense. So if we can be prepared for one emergency, we're doing better than if we couldn't do that. We want to aim on being able to put back about 6 months. The reason for that is when we talk about emergency, one of the biggest ones we see are medical emergencies. What happens when we are, God forbid, seriously injured or something happens medically that we are not able to work? Hopefully we have some time off that we can use. We have our MLA, our FMLA, we have things that will help, but a lot of positions, a lot of jobs, we don't have a lot of that to utilize either. So if we are out of work for a while, how are we going to survive? Again, the more we can put back, the better off we're going to be. And one of these, number 4, try to pay yourself first. Try to put money into savings if you can. When you get that money, whether that's directly out by the bank or you doing it yourself, but try to put that back before you go, before you see that, oh, I have an extra $40. I'm going to buy myself something to eat. I'm going to go get a manicure. I'm going to go get my hair done. Not that you can't treat yourself, but sometimes we just really, really need to watch. Our categories for unexpected expenses, we have about 4 more slides, so we should still finish up close to 3, but we may go a couple minutes over here. Home upkeep, home emergencies, because nothing ever happens when you own a home, right? That's one of our pros and cons of renting versus owning a home. Number 2, seasonal expenses. 3, medical expenses. 4, pet emergencies. How many of you have a pet? We don't think about them being expensive until something happens, in which case I was surprised to learn last year that you can get pet insurance. That was something I never would have looked into. We've had a dog for 14 years, and I did not really know that that was a thing. How we stay with our dog, we do have a vet, or did have a vet, that we only had to pay a one-time fee for all upkeep vaccinations. And it was one-time fee as long as we met all of our annual appointments. We never had to pay anything over that. Downfall, we just moved from Indiana to West Virginia and we lost our vet. So, you know, he's 14, so I don't know how many more years he has. We've probably already made our money back and then some, but at the same time, you know, we moved. We no longer have that vet. So that's one of those cons in programs like that. Auto expenses, because things never happen to our cars. Gifts or special occasions. Granted, no one says you ever have to buy a gift, But how do you feel when you go to a birthday party and you are the only one that didn't bring a gift? Unexpected travel plans. An example, you have family that lives in a different state or in a different part of the state and someone passes away and you have to attend a funeral. Those will be our unexpected travel plans. School expenses, if you have children, it could be work expenses, seasonal costs, and those pesky bill increases. Those, we never know how much, but we can pretty much plan that at some point in time, our electric bill is going to be up a little bit. Our gas, water, and trash are notorious for those bill increases every year or two. Failing to plan is planning to fail. We've probably all heard that before. So when we look at these unexpected emergencies that could come up, we are still able to somewhat plan for them. Not to the dollar, but we know when we have those savings, we can earmark a little bit. And what I mean by that is income tax time. If we can put a little bit of money back, we know about how much we owe from year to year. If we can have that already in our savings, then we have it for when we have to pay back at tax time. Maybe we don't have to pay anything back. Maybe we get money back. Again, knock on wood that happens to everybody, but we know it doesn't. If we don't owe any, then we leave that money in there. It rolls over until next tax season, and then we're good. We're safe. We also have it in there in case we need to use it for something else, but we know that we're planning ahead. Insurance premiums. If you do not have much medically going on, this may not be one for you. However, as an example, I'm a type 1 diabetic. So I know at the beginning of the year, every single year between prescriptions and everything else, I need to know what my max out of pocket is for that year. I need to know what my deductible is because I know that I'm going to need it. And if I know the year before, staying in the same job, I need to have $3,000 saved up at the beginning of the year so I can pay for those premiums, then I've got it. Because if not, more than 1 year, that has hit very hard with medical expenses. And then you wind up with the medical debt. Number 3, gas prices, especially in the summertime. If you're planning for a vacation, and most of us have probably taken even a day vacation where we've driven, we went somewhere, we factor in how much are our tickets to get into the zoo, or how much are we going to spend on a hotel. The one thing a lot of people don't plan for is what are we going to have to pay for gas. We know that notoriously summer gas prices are going to be more. So if we factor in a little bit and we have that put away, then we can, again, kind of plan for it. Back to school. We know that when the kids go back to school, they need clothes, they need their field trip fees, they need money put into the lunch account. We know that every year those are going to be the same needs that they need. So if we can put money expected for that, it may help. Does home costs? These vary by location. It could be something like, do you have big storms in your area? This was one we always tried to put money back for in Indiana, because notoriously our area always had at least one tornado every year where we would have storm damage. And granted, we have insurance, but if you've ever went through home insurance for damage, storm damage, you end up paying more than just replacing what was damaged. So if we could put back money, then we knew that if we had a branch fall on our roof, we had some money put back for that. Car expenses, making sure we stay on top of things. And down here at the bottom, AAA has done the work, and I have it as a resource at the end of the presentation if you would like to look up the specifics on this. But the average person spends $9,000 per year for driving a car, and that does not include parking fees. That's your gasoline, that's your upkeep, that's your car payment, that's your insurance. Per year, a little over $9,000 the average person spends on a vehicle. So if we can stay up on oil changes, alignments and rotations, things that a lot of times we put off because we know how much it's going to cost us in the short term, by keeping up with that, hopefully it saves in the long run. And the last one is seasonal expenses. We already talked about summertime, your electric's higher, winter, your gas is higher. All right, so now we're going to put it all together, hopefully. And again, this was sent out with the email, and I will send everyone who's in attendance, I will send this presentation and everything else to you. Yes, Sue just said WVU often pays a discount if you pay your medical bill in full. I know that even the doctor's offices and things that are affiliated with WVU hospitals, most of them will offer that same plan. Now, can you pay it all off at once? Maybe not, but could we look at something with refinancing? Or a lot of hospitals don't charge interest for a certain period of time. So just making sure we have all of that information definitely can help, because that medical debt is one that it hurts the best of us. So I want you to come up with one goal. That is your goal, is coming up with one financial goal. And when we look at our income versus our expenses and we find out whether or not we're in the black or we're in the red, that hopefully will help you come up with some kind of goal to strive for. Now, does that have to be a short-term goal within the next 3-6 months? No. Does it have to be a long-term goal, more than 3 to 5 years? No, these are completely up to you. It may just be building up those reserves so you have an emergency fund, and that's absolutely fine. When you are writing this, this is just a screenshot from that worksheet that was sent that says, I want how much money by what date, which is equal to months into years times 12 for months, because I want to save for what? Why are you saving? Why are you paying off what you want to pay off? What is your reason? To reach my goal by this date, I need to save how much money? Why am I saving? Relevance. If you look down here at the bottom, all goals that you ever set for yourself should be SMART goals. And you very well may have heard about SMART goals before. The acronym stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. The relevance is something that is key in so many goals that we leave out. We can be specific, we can know how we're going to know whether or not we've met it, and we can put a date on it. But if there's not a reason for us doing it, then a lot of times we don't reach it. An example, how many have ever set a New Year's resolution? Number one New Year's resolution, I'm going to lose weight. How much weight are you going to use? Maybe you've set an amount. I'm going to lose 20 pounds by August. If you don't have a big motivator for why you're losing weight other than I want to lose weight, maybe it's I want to look better, but there's no more added to it. The percentage of people that actually meet that goal weight from a New Year's resolution is almost none, because we don't have enough of a motivator or relevance to strive to hit it. So make sure that you have that, what am I saving for? Would anyone want to share their goal or what you would like to save for? And it very well may just be that you want to save to pay off your debt. I think that's a great goal. I would love not to owe WVU Medicine anything. I would love to own my own house, own your own car. Not owe any more student debt. That's my big one. I want to have my student debt paid off as soon as possible. Okay, Emily says having that emergency fund. What a peace of mind that would be to know that if something happens, I can afford it. Have loans paid off prior to retirement. That's a great one. Retirement is supposed to be great, right? It's not nearly as great when you're still having to pay off loans. Okay, I do have 2 slides after this with references. Again, I will send everyone that's logged on today a copy of this presentation. So you will have all of the reference material for any stats or anything used throughout this presentation. So you'll be able to see those when I share it. Our next session for August is August 17th, and it's dealing with conflict. Sue, will you go ahead and load it so that I know Heather definitely said that they didn't get it. Dealing with conflict. We're going to talk about conflict resolution. We're going to figure out what kind of conflict and communication styles you have. I think that one may surprise some of you. How to deal with confrontation. Some of you are very confrontational. Some of you probably try to avoid it as long as possible. Neither of those are great. So we're going to talk about how to use different confrontation styles at different times. We're also look at stress management, which will reflect a little bit on the self-care session. And then we're going to look at specific scenarios and how you would go about solving those scenarios. I also wanted to mention our October session. All of the others will continue being third Wednesday, but the October session will actually be on October 18th. Rather than October 19th, which is Tuesday instead of Wednesday. Our presentation for the West Virginia Rural Health Association conference down at the Greenbrier is scheduled for the same day. Not only the same day, but the exact same time from 2 to 3:30 p.m. So it will be impossible to do both of these, but we are still going to have it. It will just be the day before. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Anything that you saw throughout, any suggestions for someone else that might help them out? If not, I thank you all for attending. I hope you got something out of this. I am really quick before everyone logs off. Pull my chat box up here. I am putting in a link right now. I will also put this in the email that I send to you here as we finish up. But this link that is posted will go to a brief survey about this session. And when you, if you will, fill it out, it will ask you who your presenter was today and their contact. That is my email. It's also up here on the screen, Kay Limley. Now that's confusing because my name is Kayla Richard. That's my maiden name. If you will, put that email in, and that way those surveys come to me. Otherwise, it's just a brief survey about the session. It takes maybe 5 minutes max. And that way I can let you know what you thought. Okay? Or you can let me know what you thought. I think I said that wrong. Thank you guys so much. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I hope that I will see you August 17th as we talk about conflict.